There's a lot of strange bedfellows in our current day politics, and there's been no greater adjustment for this reporter than learning to live in a world where the people who call themselves liberal leftists can regularly be found singing the praises of the military industrial complex and the national security state when they're not busy being dutiful water carrying handmaidens for the world's richest, most odious billionaire industrial tycoons. If you want to piss off a Democrat in the year 2022, tell him we're only spending $20 billion on the Ukrainian proxy war instead of $30 billion, and then ask him to show you his Vladimir Zelensky bikini briefs because you know he's wearing them. Now, did you know there are actual National Socialists fighting on the Ukrainian side in this war? The side that you and I are financing courtesy of President and semi-animated cadaver Joe Biden. And it's not correct to call these guys nouveau National Socialists because today's Azov Brigade has a direct, unbroken lineage back to the Azov brigades that fought alongside the Wehrmacht and the Waffen SS against the Red Army in the last World War. Which is to say, Joe Biden is financing the paramilitary operations of real, honest-to-God National Socialists, and he's paying with it with your money, while at the same time calling you a white supremacist. And sure, it's tempting to say he's a senile old codger with a lump of congealed applesauce where his brain used to be, who's just trying to read the words on the screen and doesn't really know which way is up. But we would do well to avoid giving him any sort of a free pass here because he really does enjoy rubbing your fucking nose in it. It's the thing that happens when dull, unexceptional, insecure men gain inscrutable power. Not only do they abuse it, but they revel in abusing it. Tony Fauci displaying a row of Tony Fauci prayer candles in his home office during TV interviews. That's another good example of the phenomenon. Now, another good way of pissing off a current day Democrat is by saying, I think it's bad for the president and the attorney general to be using the FBI as a political hit squad. Or perhaps, trespassing and vandalism are not sufficient cause for 18 months of pre-trial detention in solitary confinement. Or people shouldn't be subject to federal hate crime charges because they don't want their kids reading gay porn in school. Now, they may fancy themselves tolerant and progressive, but in their gleeful willingness to turn the apparatus of federal law enforcement upon the political opponents of the regime, that is some 1950s Central America bullshit right there. If we leave them to their own devices, how long will it be before the Democrats are locking up Trump voters in secret prisons underneath soccer stadiums? Are we there already? Or, for practical purposes, we might be. With the indefinite detention of January 6th defendants who stand accused of crimes that would be adjudicated in under 7 days under any other circumstances. You cannot be in favor of the indefinite detention of political dissidents and call yourself an American. And if you can't recognize that the persecution of those people, and it very much is persecution, is hateful to the moral principles of fair play and basic decency, then you damn sure can't call yourself a liberal either. And sure, on a superficial level, it's easy to dye your hair half pink and half purple, shove a javelin through your nose, get the latest fashionable neck tattoo, and declare yourself an individualist rebel iconoclast who speaks truth to power, damn it, because they sure do love that cliche. Might be their favorite one of all, in fact. But here's the thing. When your political worldview conforms in every respect with the political worldview of all the richest men in the world, you might want to take a step back, possibly 2 steps even, and pose to yourself that most difficult existential question of them all. Wait, am I a fucking shill for the establishment? Because, spoiler alert, yes you are. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where tonight's opening joke has been redacted by order of the Attorney General, good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And I want to bounce a hypothetical off you. Can I bounce a hypothetical off you? Suppose it's the year 1992, and you are one of the world's political elite. The post-war order, which had been in place for nearly half a century, has just well and truly collapsed with the dissolution of the Soviet Union on Christmas Day 1991. Now, suppose you and the other global political elites were trying to figure out a new order with which to replace the old order. A new world order, if you will, to use the term that was coined by our 41st president, George H.W. Bush, in that very same year of 1992. And suppose, as part of the plan for this new order that you were trying to kick off, you wanted to ensure that in North America and Western Europe, the birth rate would collapse as quickly as possible, to the point where 100% of net population growth would have to be from immigration. And we had a pretty solid birth rate, relatively speaking, in 1992. In fact, it had been trending upward throughout the 80s, particularly during Reagan's second term, which stands to reason because times were good economically, so people could afford to get married and buy houses and raise families, which people like to do when it's a possibility. But something happens in 1992 that makes that birth rate start suddenly trending downward. Right at the exact same moment the federal government started underwriting student loans. Right at the exact same moment the education department sent out the guidance to all the high schools in the country saying, all right, no more vocational programs, no teaching of useful skills for the majority of your kids who are going straight from high school to the workforce. No more of that. Nope. From this moment on, everybody goes to college, damn it, because in the new American future, China's going to do all our manufacturing, Mexican immigrants will do all of our manual labor, and every American will have a fancy job sitting in a cubicle doing futuristic computer-type stuff all day. And look, I think sometimes we take it for granted that our political leaders are bumbling buffoons who can't tell their ass from a hole in the ground. But I think we have to begrudgingly give them some credit here. For it has to be said, their 30-year plan succeeded far beyond anybody's wildest dreams. They created exactly the type of society they set out to create. Cratering marriage rate? Check. Cratering birth rate? Check. Tens of millions of new transactional relationships between citizens and the central government? Check. But in the 1992 version of the scheme, only 20% of the student loans were being underwritten by the federal government. And damn it, there were still a distressing number of young people who were figuring out ways to start their adult lives without getting themselves permanently in hock to Uncle Sam. And we just can't have that. We need to maximize the number of citizens who are in transactional relationships with the federal government. Anybody who isn't relying on direct government assistance to pay their living expenses, we need to bury those people under an avalanche of government debt, because when the election rolls around, that is how we buy the vote. It is Democrat politics 101. If you've got the government paying your house rent and your doctor bills and God knows what else, and there's two candidates in the election and one of them says, I promise I'm going to keep your rent check coming, well, you tell me which guy you're going to vote for. Student debt is just the latest version of that same old scam when you get down to it. It's a tale as old as time. Even Joe Biden's not senile enough to have forgotten how that game works. So you've got an historically unpopular president whose party has well and truly wrecked the country during their brief time in power, but there's a midterm election coming up, and we damn sure can't run on our record of achievement, so let's just give out cash prizes instead. And that is what this is. It is cash for votes. It is retail politics in the absolute literal sense of the term. And so, if you're, say, an immigrant landscaper from Honduras who's currently eating ramen noodle cups for lunch because that's the only way you can afford to put gas in your truck, well, now you get the joyous privilege of paying the student loan debts of the people whose lawns you mow all day. Because that's what you came to America for, right? So you could help pay the debts of clinical psychologists who make $117,000 a year plus full benefits? But back to the main narrative. We get to the end of the 2000s, the aughts, if you prefer, and that birth rate just isn't crashing quite as fast as we would like. And we need to get lots more young people so permanently in debt they can never move out of mom and dad's basement, much less marry and start a family. But I've got it, says Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Let's say we take that 20% of student loans that are being underwritten by the federal government and we'll just ease that bad boy on up to 80%. How about that? And then Biden says, that's good, I like it. But I think we really need to double down on the predatory lending. Let's hire some sleazy used car salesmen and we'll train them up to be twice as sleazy. We'll sleaze these fuckers up so good, used car salesmen will start making jokes about how disreputable they are. And then Obama says, Joe, I think this is the longest conversation you and I have ever had. Now get the fuck away from me. You smell like Geritol and soiled diapers. And it has to be said, when that bill passed the Congress, moving the federally underwritten share of student loans from 20% to 80%, it was not a close vote. That thing got bipartisan support, and as a practical matter, if you set aside the Unaffordable Care Act, that bill probably caused more damage to the country than any other bill in recent history. But back to the starting point. In 1992, to complete the hypothetical, when George H.W. Bush proclaimed the New World Order, which is sort of the same thing that we now call globalism, because he was never talking about some shadowy cabal of Illuminati secretly governing the world. And I do apologize if I have upset any conspiracy theorists. Actually, no, I don't. I don't apologize. They can get over it. If the intent of that order, if the desired end state that the project was seeking to achieve was a world in which national sovereignty is vastly diminished, in which all population growth in Western countries is through immigration, in which billionaire oligarch industrialists wield more power than kings and presidents and prime ministers, and the goal was to achieve all those ends within 30 years, how could they have pulled it off any better than they have? Are we supposed to believe that wasn't the objective all along? Are we supposed to believe this was all just an unfortunate decades-long series of blunders by well-intentioned leaders who just wanted all the world's people to live in peace and harmony and be really tremendously well-educated? Now, there is no industry in the United States that has seen its profit margins explode more exponentially in this century than big education has. From sea to shining sea, we have colleges and universities whose endowments are bigger than the economies of entire foreign countries. Moreover, and more troublingly, there's now a revolving door between the university boardroom and the top echelons of political power. At least half of the idiots in Joe Biden's cabinet, they were biding their time as university presidents during the 4 years that Trump was in office, and they will go right back to those same jobs when Biden leaves office in January of 25. Our university presidents and our presidential cabinet secretaries should not be drawn from the same pool of people. That is an extremely serious problem. The absolute last place that good public policy originates is in the college faculty lounge. Education and politics are supposed to be distinct and separate fields of endeavor, and they always were, right up until goddamn Woodrow Wilson. When Wilson went from the Ivy League university president game into elective politics, that was considered a radical career shift back then. Nobody had ever heard of such a thing before. Fast forward 110 years, and now education and politics are so commingled it's well nigh impossible to discern where the one ends and the other begins. But as the universities have grown wealthy beyond the dreams of avarice and politically powerful enough to where some of them are effectively states unto themselves, as more and more Americans have gone deeper and deeper into debt in pursuit of that magic piece of paper that is supposed to be your golden ticket into polite society, what has become of the quality of education they deliver? Or can we even call it education anymore? There have been a lot of videos making the rounds recently. You've probably seen one or two of them at least, where a reporter is just strolling around a university campus in anywhere USA and asking people very basic questions about their own native country. The type of questions where it would be unconscionable if the average sixth grader didn't know the answer. Questions like, what is the capital of the United States? Who was the first president? Which world war comes after World War I? Who's buried in Grant's tomb? What country is the Queen of England from? I am not making up any of those, by the way. And people on the left always do a lot of harumphing about these types of videos. Like, oh, those videos are deceptively edited. They only show the people who didn't know the answers. But is that really your best defense? Even if the claim is true, even if the videos are deceptively edited, even if the vast majority of the students knew the answers to the questions, you still had a sufficient supply of ignorant dumbasses to make a 20-minute video out of it. You've still got a distressingly high number of young adults who've been immersed in the world of higher education for 3, 4, 5 years or more, who don't know what the capital of the United States is? But on the other hand, if you ask those same kids to explain systemic racism or patriarchal microaggressions, you probably would get a perfect 30-minute monologue, an entire soliloquy without a syllable out of place, because let's call things what they are. When you take out those loans, when you show up on the university campus for your first day, nobody there gives 2 squirts of piss about imparting to you any sort of useful skills or practical knowledge. You are there to learn how to get woke and how to vote for Democrats, and that's it. And 4 years from today, when they hand you that worthless bachelor's degree that you're still going to be paying off at age 40, your professors and administrators won't care that you can't do basic arithmetic or write a grammatically coherent sentence or name 10 of the 50 states in the union. As long as you leave that campus for the last time speaking perfect, impeccable wokesterese and recoiling in horror at the prospect of ever voting for a Republican, then they can all congratulate themselves on a job well done. But here's the thing about this $300 billion loan forgiveness debacle. Why did Joe Biden's handlers feel the need to toss such a big slab of red meat toward the only constituency where he still maintains solid support, when it had the potential of pissing off everybody else, including a lot of people in his own party? The only subset of the voting population where Joe Biden's approval has not fallen by double digits is college-educated whites, which, hell, that fact in itself is probably a pretty powerful object lesson in the worthlessness of a college degree. If getting a fancy education means I gain the ability to think Joe Biden is an awesome president, then I don't think I want your fancy education. I think I would prefer to remain a benighted bumpkin, all things considered. But isn't it fascinating how, in all the reactions to this student debt forgiveness thing, it doesn't occur to anybody to ask the obvious questions like, why is the federal government underwriting 80% of student loans? Is that something we want to keep doing when it's had such obviously disastrous effects that we just saddled Joe taxpayer with this $300 billion extra burden that he didn't ask for or do anything to deserve? Now, not only have the Democrats lost the ability to do anything else but grow the government and spend more money, they've also lost the ability or the desire to confer benefits on law-abiding citizens who play by the rules. In the age of Joe Biden, Democrats are always bending over backward to reward and venerate people who break the law, people who act irresponsibly, people who prey on the innocent. And they impose all of the burdens, all of the punishments, all the slander, all the venom, all the vitriol upon people who have spent their lives abiding by the rules and being upstanding citizens and members of society. Those are the bad guys, says Joe Biden. How about let's get the federal government the hell out of the student loan business? Better yet, how about let's make the damn universities cover the cost of it? You think? How about let's remove the rule that you can't discharge student loan debt in bankruptcy, and anybody who's paying their loans currently, why would you keep doing it after this? But I guess we're never supposed to ask those questions or talk about reform. We're supposed to just keep putting Band-Aids on the result of the bad policy instead of actually revisiting the policy, because, God, why would we ever do that? That would not make too much sense, damn it. Because guys like Joe Biden might have to grudgingly admit that they didn't have the whole world figured out in 1992, and they wound up causing a lot of needless harm. We can't have any of that. So we'll just keep screwing the pooch and kicking the ball down the road and sticking you with the bill, Mr. and Mrs. America. And don't get any ideas about shirking that responsibility, because we've got 87,000 brand new IRS agents who are authorized to liquidate your punk ass with extreme prejudice if you do not pay up. Oh, also, I know I bring this up every time, but if it is actual knowledge you seek, a university campus is the last place you should be looking for it. You know that little glowing rectangle in your back pocket, the one you primarily use for porn and video games? It contains the entire collected repository of human knowledge and understanding. No predatory loans required. So if it is knowledge you actually want, as opposed to a dumb piece of paper that says you're smart, and start fucking reading. What are you waiting for? But I think Larry Elder summed this thing up better in 5 words than I could ever do in 3,500 when he said, and I quote, "This is reparations for rich white people." Thanks for watching. Hope everybody had a good week. Hope the weekend is even better. I will see you Monday. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.